The nonprofit TAT Foundation was created in 1973 to bring spiritual seekers and finders together. We publish books, videos, and a free online newsletter. We maintain a website of spiritual resources and hold 4 spiritual retreat weekends each year. Our goal is to offer practical guidance for following a spiritual path and living a spiritual life. For more information, go to tatfoundation.org. That's tatfoundation.org. Howdy Mikowski will explore the challenge to find and become the truth. It's a challenge that he knows well. He was a seeker, of course. In his book, Falling for Truth, A Spiritual Death and Awakening, Howdy explores the story of his particular spiritual path, which included peaks and valleys and which had its mental and physical struggle as well, leading up to his awakening. Originally, Howdy planned to give a talk, but then decided to divide the time in this session between speaking and taking questions. So you can post your questions to the chat box as we go along. So let's welcome now Howdy Mikowski to his first TAT presentation. Howdy.
Hi, thanks Mike for having me here. And I have to admit, I've felt a bit of pressure the last few weeks preparing for this. I mean, I'm giving a talk on the topic of truth to the TAT Foundation and its members. Because to me, becoming truth is mostly just unbecoming false, and holding on to that power of doubt. But what gives me authority to do that? You know, I was just a guy who was obsessively serious 20 years ago for like 7 years. I thought I found a lot. I thought I was really clever. Then I got careless, I slipped, I fell in a canyon, and I died. And in the course of dying, I saw that I never actually existed. I wrote a book. Sean was kind enough to go through many years of working with it to bring it out, and here I am. So maybe my only real authority to talk to you is about being a careless fool, you know? But as I thought about it more, I realized that the entire period of my 20 years, really, I was a student of false. I was a student of looking for delusion, misperception, conditioning, hypnosis, actually anything. It didn't matter what the field was. It was a sense of, how do I prove that that's true? Or how do I prove that I should pay attention to that even? And it developed this real inner battle to try to determine how to even know what you could classify as something to pay attention to and something that's just trying to fool you. So I thought I'd start out this short 30 minutes that we have here by reading a quote as a warm-up, and then take your questions. And I thought, well, I can answer questions on things like self-observation and self-inquiry and observing the self, which are the foundations really of Rose and the TAT Foundation. I thought the other speakers here at TAT are so much better and more skillful at answering those questions. So I thought, let's leave that in their ballpark. And I'm going to suggest you ask me questions in the areas that are maybe not often asked about in these kind of sessions, if you'd like, but are still very much a part of Rose's overall philosophy. You know, maybe some questions of what's it like to die, and what happens when you come back after experiencing death. How do you stay sane in an insane world? Or should you seek relative truth over an absolute truth? Or maybe you want to talk about the story of Plato's cave and what it means to exit the cave, or just about anything. I thought there's 1,000 different ways this can go, and I thought maybe I should let you direct where it goes rather than me thinking this is where you should go with it. So I'm going to start by reading a quote, and the quote is from John Kent's fantastic book. I think it was our PhD thesis, right? Something like the Search for Reality Through the Self. Absolutely fantastic piece of work. If you've not read it on searchwithin.org, you really should. But here's his quote about Rose. The path Rose describes is not easy or pretty. It does not promise immediate peace or comfort, social betterment, a loving God, or eventual celestial delights. It promises work at self-understanding, the anxious uncertainty of doubt, the dissolution of the mirage of enjoyment and egotism that we have used to justify continuous living, the tension of existing in conscious ignorance, the challenge of countering adverse forces, the increasing loneliness, the quiet frustration of being stuck between heaven and earth, yet having a home in neither, the pain of an awareness that is as yet inadequate to answer itself, and finally, the inescapable appointment with death that mercilessly exposes all of our lies and makes a mockery of our dreams. Unless one's desire is for the unembellished truth, regardless of price, one will have little motivation to continue on this kind of path as long as more attractive side roads are available. It's powerful writing and a powerful presentation of, to me, Rose, and to what some of this is, which is this idea of observing everything, and not only figuring out who is observing, but trying to figure out what you're observing and how is that being formed. So I'm going to just open this up. Maybe some people have read the book and you've got a couple of questions to start us off. We can go from there, and we'll see where this takes us. And I'm happy to go, like I say, in any direction you'd want to go. If you want to ask questions about me personally or things that I've done or didn't do, it's free to go anywhere. Okay, so I can see Rajesh has asked, I'm wondering, what is the difference between looking at yourself, e.g. thoughts, and looking at the observer? Which is better? Okay, well, I would say neither is necessarily better or worse. You have to start where you are. And where you are usually for all of us is we come to believe our thoughts, right? Our thoughts are just there. They show up. We don't know where they come from. We don't know where they go. We don't know why we even have them. And there's a moment, though, that will come. How would I describe it first, right? First, you're just trying to see your thought. You don't want to stop them. I think that's where the standard meditation gets you in trouble. And that is, they want you just to clear your mind and be calm. People like Rose and the way I did it over the years was, I wanted to see what was there. I wanted to see what I was thinking. Where did it come from? Why did I think that? And you could actually start linking it to other things. So, but this is learning how your thoughts work. And then, yeah, like Rajesh asked, all of a sudden I could start asking, wait a minute, who's that? Who is watching my thought? Wait a minute. I've always thought I was the thought. Now I'm seeing the thought. So who is the thing that sees the thought? And now you have this turning again, and it becomes harder. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, something is seeing the thing that I'm observing that's looking at the thought. And it's this continuous backward motion. It's very hard to describe, but it's what it's really doing is taking you closer and closer into the realm of death, which is the doorway or the transformation that will take you away from everything you thought you were. Yeah. Okay, and that takes us to Lisa's question. Can you tell us a bit more about your death experience? Yeah. So I'd been seeking for 6 or 7 years, really hard, been very, very lucky. I mean, I got lucky enough to meet and spend time with Native medicine men, Korean Zen monk, shamans from Brazil. I mean, I was just lucky. I was really, really lucky. But I thought I'd gone somewhere, and I went to Egypt for my first trip to Egypt, and there I had an experience where I split in two. There was two consciousnesses at the same time, one seeing me and one seeing where the nothing was. But when I went to this canyon and just slipped, there was a raging river. It's near a waterfall called Johnson Canyon in Calgary. And I just got too close. It was wet, and I slipped and I fell in. And in the course of falling in, I realized I'm not getting out. Like I'm not getting out of this. The current was too strong, and I swam as hard as I could. I had a friend on the bank. I went to reach for him, and I pulled him into. So now we were both in, and I had no savior. I was now alone. And that's when I realized this is where I'm going to die. How interesting. And I had no need to struggle. I had no need in that moment to try to continue living my life. It was just, I'm going to die, and I'm going to have great seats to watch it. That's all that was going to happen. And in that moment of acceptance, everything I ever knew was me was gone. There was no thought. There were no experiences. There were no hopes. There were fears, there were no dreams, there were no memories. I mean, it was just a total emptiness. And then in the emptiness, there was like I would almost call it like a download happened. I mentioned that yesterday. This is like this information just poured in this microsecond of things I still have no idea what happened. And in that unbelievable stillness, it was not an experience of stillness, right? It was just stillness. That's all there was. It was like looking at a movie screen, but there was no me watching the screen. It's very hard to describe. And just as that was sort of deepening, I realized, oh, my friend is in. If I don't get out, how is my friend going to get out? And I bumped into a boulder, moved towards the side of the land, was able to crawl out. He was crawling out too. And then we just sat there for a couple of hours and just stared at the water and shared our experiences very, very slowly. And it changed everything, because at that moment, I looked back at my whole spiritual path and wondered how much of what I was doing was based on trying to get something for me, trying to improve me, trying to get me better, trying to get me happier, trying to get me smarter, trying to get me more liked. And then all of a sudden I found out I was testing reality all these years. How hard was I testing me? How hard was I testing the reality of me? And now here I was. There's no me. And for a while, there was great clarity, unbelievable clarity. But I got fooled in thinking I'd seen everything when I'd only seen a part of the everything. And we can go into detail what you want, but it then became a very difficult 10 years, actually. And it was only that's when I got in touch with Rose and was reading TAT Foundation texts. It was at the time that after this had happened and was starting to explain what had just occurred and what I was going through. But I got to it. I got to it a bit late. I wished I'd had that material before the experience. It would have helped tremendously. I heard you mention death as a practice. Can you walk us through that as a daily practice? Part of it was just that started right after my friend died. A friend was murdered there, and that was this idea that I don't know that anyone in my life is going to be there tomorrow. I don't know I will be here tomorrow, and I didn't know a person was going to be there tomorrow. So why was I going to wait? Why was I going to wait for anything? Why would I wait for tomorrow to do something? Or why would I put off something that was important to me? You know, I'll do this and I'll get to that tomorrow. I really want to do that, but I'll do it tomorrow. And it was this forcing thing of, I don't know there's going to be a tomorrow. Wait a minute. I don't know there's going to be a tomorrow. So it actually opened a lot of doorways, because I said a lot more nice things to people than I ever did for quite a long time, because I wanted them to hear it, or they might not be here tomorrow. I know I see Art in the window. My wife had been at a TAT meeting with him back in 2012, and they did a really interesting death exercise. That maybe if I recall how she described it correctly, is they went to a graveyard and looked for a tombstone. That's right. Yeah, and that was going to be your own tombstone that you were finding, and that you were going to then produce your own epitaph, you might say, on the tombstone, that you were producing externally this final resting place for yourself, how you wanted it to look, to really start to recognize that, yes, this is a 100% guarantee. So why would I run away from it? Why not run towards it? I think that's also a great death exercise. Curious what you consider we're actually looking at outside. I spent a good 5 years testing reality by a ton of very, very difficult observational practices. And it got to the point of it started with two things. It started with this idea for me of, do my thoughts create reality? And I started to notice a correlation between a word in my mind and the external reality, that literally the table was there because I said the word table in my mind. The ball was there because I said ball in my mind. And I started doing practices to shut my mind off, not to be quiet. I wanted to see what would happen if literally I blew my mind up. what would happen to the world that I thought of as real and solid? When that finally happened, it stopped being real and solid. And it was, at the beginning, it was very, very terrifying. Because trees were no longer trees, walls were no longer walls. I was never sure when I sat down on a chair if the chair was still going to be there when I went to sit on it. So the books that said the world is an illusion became a completely different thing. But at the same time, as I was doing those exercises, I had these bizarre also understandings that not only is reality, you might call like a dream or an illusion, but there's a second dream or an illusion that's been placed on top of the dream by an outside force that you might say is controlling the perception of everyone and everything in it. So we're experiencing a false reality of a false reality of something that we're not even reaching from our deepest true nature. It was the weirdest thing to go through as I was trying to unravel it. But like I say, the canyon experience had me. Gary Harmon, he had the quote of, if you're seeing the world as an illusion, but you're not including yourself in that illusion, you're making the classic spiritual mistake. And that was the mistake I was making. I was testing reality hard, but I wasn't testing myself that hard, other than with things like the life recapitulation and the observation I was doing. I didn't test it as well as I did outside reality. I hope this is useful for someone. I have no idea. I'm just talking. What are your ideas about how to work with or avoid distractions? That would be all the things that the group members have talked about. Your commitment. Your commitment would avoid distractions instantaneously. As soon as you say you will do something, it kind of doesn't matter what will get put in your way. If you say you're going to be at the party at 7 o'clock, you're going to be at the party at 7 o'clock. Nothing can get in your way that will stop you from being there. So in many cases, the distractions won't come, right? That was something I only really learned when I picked up Rose's material after the fact. I wished I had known that more way back when I was 12. That the more you say that you hold on to your commitment, whatever small little thing you say you'll do, you actually make the path easier. I keep things relatively short so I can get to you. Anima, what is truth? What did you find? I would say stillness. Nothing. A nothing which included everything. Nothing which was a nothing that wasn't what I'd ever thought nothing was. When I was with Mr. Park for all those years, he used to tell us all the time, he wanted us to meditate on nothing but nothing. And so we would all try to have nothing in our minds. We would try to have a blank mind. And he would look at us like we're insane. No, that's not what I asked you to do. I asked you to think of nothing but nothing. And just like, almost like the Greek, what Socrates, right? I know that I know nothing. It was very similar to this, having to unravel what Mr. Park was telling us. He was telling us, of course, to have no other goal but nothing. And when we were constantly embraced in nothing, we would be, of course, embraced in our totality. I think that's what he was trying to get at. And, as soon as there's movement, the stillness will always be there. I think that was another trick that it took a while to begin to see, is that it has nothing to do with what the form does. So that it doesn't mean that the form has to sit and be quiet or be still or have a still mind. There's the stillness is there when you dance, when you sing, when you jump, when you get angry, when you do anything. The stillness is always there. The quiet is always there. It's behind the action, or it's there when the action is before it even begins and after it ends. You mentioned that a close friend death had an impact. Can you go on what happened afterwards? Yeah, I sort of mentioned that a bit yesterday, and that was just to really start questioning the stories that I'd been telling myself, or the stories the world had been telling me of how I was supposed to live and what I was supposed to do. I began to start seeing, I began to start pulling apart the whole world. Everything that was being told to me from everywhere, history, science, religion, the news, government, law. It didn't matter what it was. I began to see everyone and everything is lying to us all the time. That's actually what the society around us, I realized, was doing. It's lying to us, and it's distracting us. That's another good one. It wants to keep us busy. So as soon as it finds out we will be interested in something that's kind of detrimental to knowing self, it'll give us more of it, lots of it. You know, you might say there's only one real conspiracy theory, and that's the reality of the dream. So within the dream itself, there'll be a million conspiracy theories, of course, because you're dealing with the first one itself, which is the non-checking of how real reality actually is. And so that process after Jones began, I began to see the world's insane. The world is insane. This was 20 years ago. I mean, it's insane. It's beyond insane now, right? I mean, we live in total insanity. And I think it's the greatest time ever to be a truth seeker. Absolutely. If you're a truth seeker right now, it's a gift. It's a gift. Because all you have to do is look out your front door and you're going to see the false. You don't have to go anywhere to look for it. Look out the front door. There it is. The whole world has decided to do what somebody's told them to do on a newscast without critical thinking, without digging into it for themselves. They just do it because they were told, and the whole world is just gone. What? And I think this is just my belief now, but I think this is happening now because there's a doorway. I think there's something energetically. There's like an opening in Plato's cave right now that if you are serious, you can put years of work into weeks or months. I've seen that with a few people who have been contacting me over the last year. Their progress in their examination of whatever it is they want to examine has been tenfold whatever I would expect it to be. They have moved to such incredible lengths just from starting with, wait a minute, it's insane out there. So what's not insane? That's another good one to ask, right? When you're talking about finding truth, sanity, true sanity. What is true sanity? And Rose had a great comment for that, right? It was just, if you can see your own mind or you could see yourself from something deeper and you like what you see, you're sane. That was a great comment because it's dependent only upon your deepest self. It's not dependent on something external telling you what's sane. You are becoming the authority of your own self. One of the people in my breakout group was talking about that, how she was becoming so much more learning how to be an authority of her own self to be able to make those distinctions of what's true, what's not true. Let her intuition lead her here as opposed to there. You mentioned yesterday that a download happened, and then you went looking within. Do you have a clear view of what that was, where it came from? I would almost describe these downloads, and this is just me guessing now, it's similar to the movies Pleasantville or The Truman Show, where David and Jennifer were like an outside force that broke through the bubble of reality and produced a completely new view of the world to the people that live there, or Sylvia in The Truman Show. When she showed up, she was the first one telling Truman, your world's a lie. And even though she was gone, it was just this spark of a moment that kept him driving, sort of got in his brain and he couldn't get out of it. That's what I felt the download was on one level. It was this something from outside what I would know of as the reality I've ever known, gifting me with some kind of insight that was not automatic, that I was going to have to choose or not choose to try to understand myself. Something similar happened when I wrote my last book on the world's expositions. It happened in Florence when I was there in one of the cathedrals, and it just all of a sudden, it's like when I got back, I realized I have to study these expositions because they're so crazy. This story needs to be told. And I don't know where the information came from to tell me to do this. It's similar to the painting. It's probably you don't see it very well because my room is very dark here. It's night here in Norway. But that's one of the first Annunciation pictures done in the Renaissance. It's in the monastery of San Marco. And of course, the Annunciation, which, if you take away the religious terms, is in a sense a form of transmission. It's the spirit producing into the human form a power or a knowing or an intent or a desire or an understanding that gets them to, without knowing where it's come from, to act and move. Let's see. I'm trying to catch up with all of these here. To Anna's question, what is the partial truth you found? What is the partial truth versus the complete truth? Partial truths would be, of course, truths in the dream state. Truths within this place, relative truths. I don't know if I have the complete truth. I'll be very honest. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I'm okay with that either way. I'm okay with whatever comes or doesn't come from it from this point. I feel a great gratitude and a gift for what's happened to this point and for what I've been shared and for the desires to try to live. I said there were 4 things I wanted to try. I was going to start realizing I had to live my life by, and that was honesty. And that's complete honesty of everything, external and internal. To look on both sides, not just look at the light, but I was going to look in the dark. And I delved into the darkness a lot of myself and reality. 2 would be commitment, all about that. 3 was a word I mentioned yesterday, was integrity. And the 4th word, if I really had to pare down, like the 4th thing would be the courage. The courage to know that you're going to have to, at some point, face death, and to have the courage and the energy to not, you might say, crap out when the doorway came, when Plato's cave is, you open the emergency exit and you got a chance to look and move your way out. You're not going to be frightened and turn back and go back in your seat in the theater. And I've tried to hold on to those 4. Only got a few minutes left, so I don't try to get to a couple more. How do you test the recapitulation? The life recapitulation, which is the life review that I did, what would happen was, for a long, long time, I knew I was re-experiencing just my life the way I had seen it. But every once in a while, there would be something that would come up that, wait a minute, what was that? I didn't experience that. Is this a dream? Was this and I began, over a year or 2 into it, began to start seeing I'd forgotten huge events of my life that were very tiny, very small little events. But it's like my mind it removed them from my story. And the life recapitulation over time began opening up these small little events that had major consequences in where I went and how I went and why I did things. And then when I finished the life recapitulation, like if you have the book and you read that whole story in chapter 5, I mean, my mind exploded 2 weeks after I'd finished my life recapitulation, when the biggest event of my life that literally changed everything in it had been erased from my mind, but the life recapitulation pulled it out of my body. Sorry, I have to kind of say these things rather quickly for you so you can get to the group. I think 1 or 2 more. The concept that we are being manipulated, hypnotized, sounds very Gnostic. Yeah, I mean, Rose himself, right? He called his work the Albigen Papers, and he named it after the Cathars, the Albigen Crusade. And the Cathars are a group I've studied now quite a lot in the last 2 or 3 years, which are, you might as well call them Gnostics. And they had a very unique view of Christianity. They called themselves original Christians, and they believed that all of reality is of the devil. So they believed that this is a mistake. They called it hell. They call it a simulation. That's the actual way it's described. And that only by renouncing all of that and holding firm to what they called the true God, what you call Christ principle or your true nature, or however you want to view that by holding on to that, and allowed you to have this release from standard, all the traps of reality. which again they called hell, a simulated controlled reality. And I think there were so many things in Rose's Albigen papers, which is hard to read, but that indicate that slyly in between the lines that he understood Cathar thought, and that it was in his work. I don't know, because I didn't get a chance to ask him. I wished I did. I wished I could have asked him some of my Egyptian and Cathar and Knights Templar revelations to see if he would say, I kind of agree with that, or you're off the deep end. What the hell are you talking about? One last one, Mike. Should I take one more? It seems as having experienced a multi-dimensional event myself, mine was hell in the moment. It was an electrocution feeling. The multiple imaging of what I was 16 was horrific. Yeah, that's again, because I see art in the window, I know people like Art had it when they had their I don't know how to describe my experience, but I know some get the experience and it's a bit smoother. But I think those people have done a lot of work to release a lot of egoic bonds beforehand. They've done a lot of really tough work on the self. So maybe when the moment comes, it's a little less, we'll call it painful. But if somebody is really, the more you're grasping at the moment grace comes, Carl Renz told me once, grace is amazing because grace is merciless because it takes away everything and gives you nothing. And when it takes everything away, the more of everything you have, the more painful it's going to be when it takes it. So it makes that doesn't surprise me that when they go through this, it's probably a torturous thing. I'd even wonder, because there's an explosion of energy can come with it. And I'll just finish it off, Mike. Maybe human spontaneous combustion. Remember that stories you've heard about many times? Maybe that's somebody having an awakening experience and they had so much energy when it happened, their body couldn't contain it, and they literally just awakened and poof and burned away at the same time. Nice. What a nice thought to end the talk.
Thank you, Howdy. Thank you, Howdy Bukowski. The questions are still coming, but we're out of time for this part. I'd like to remind everyone that after the breakout